Bam, I don't know when to talk because I just love the music when it comes in, guys. Welcome to the show. It is Truth Time here at the TruthWire. I am your host, Craig Pasta Jardula. No. Put her back on the screen. Don't you dare. Put her back on the screen. Where is she? My Lord.
He is frozen.
This is my life, y'all. This is my life.
Frozen.
Her sister's frozen.
Jeez.
That's what's happening. Frozen my ass. Jesus Louise. Guys, thank you so much. Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Craig Pasta Jardula. It is TruthWire time. Fiorella will join us when she's good and ready. It should be sooner than later. But we want to thank you all. Remember, all the ways to help out independent media and this show are listed down below. Want to say hello and thank you to some of the people from the Third Eye community, a.k.a. my old show, AM Wake Up, the one that Steve is still rocking over there on Rockfin and Rumble in the mornings. You can check it out from 7 to 10 Pacific time. 10 to 1 every single day. It's got a great show on Tuesdays. Tomorrow, T-Lab Tuesday is there. Charles was there today, I believe, earlier. Eyes and Ears, I think his name is. The new guy in the game. He's really doing well. Got to meet him at the Third Eye Carnival in Tennessee. So go check out that show. I want to also remind everybody, every Wednesday in a couple of days, I do my show, Drive Time, on WBAI New York. Every Wednesday from 4 p.m. Eastern to 5 p.m., we open up the phone lines and we have a good time. If you want to write the number down, it's 212-209-2877. 212-209-2877. I got some old friends that will be calling in this week. Alex Strenger will probably call in and talk a little bit about Israel and what's going on over there. And my old friend, I wanted fam to hear this, our old friend in the activist community, the Bernie Sanders Diner community, Michelle Manos, will be joining the show this Wednesday. We have a great interview we're going to show at the end of this show today. This is the last part of it. We would talk to Ted Rall. Here is fam. We talked to Ted Rall. He wrote a new book, What's Left? What's Left of the Left is what I asked the whole question. So thank you so much, Peace Dave, for noticing how thin I am. I've been going on crazy diets trying to beat this eczema out of my system, repairing the gut. And to do so, you got to can't eat so much pasta and pizza, fam. But you want to mention about how good the pizza is in Moscow compared to Chicago? Because Kit did leave me a message for Easter saying Happy Easter. Are you frozen again? No, she's moving her eyes. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice of you to join us today. Would you like to say hi and address the crowd that I've been talking to for the last 5 minutes?
I apologize for my internet, Pasta. You don't have to be so rude,
Eyes up here. I'm over here. Look at me. People just said how nice and thin I am. Can you please acknowledge them that? Because you always, mention how old and slow I am.
I'm sorry you need such validation from everybody.
I don't need it from everybody. Just need it from you, fam, for once. Anyways, guys. Sorry. Now she wants to speak. Fam, do you like this shirt? My thin shirt. Sometimes I can't win and I get too chubby. Listen, when we started the Convo Couch years ago, I think one of the goals out there was to educate a lot of people on foreign policy, especially the people that we were hanging around with. By the way, I've reconnected just recently with Michelle Manos, and I invited her to come on and talk to me on WBAI about Bernie and AOC. So that's going to be interesting. So we're going to see how that's going. She has accepted, and hopefully we can have a conversation. But fam, last show on Tuesday, released the whole tweets when she exposed the Bernie Sanders campaign, the people involved, who they were, which would hopefully provide some information moving forward on what we should do in the future, which would be a quick, for me, no way, not going to support them. But your thoughts on AOC Bernie real quickly, just kind of tidying up what we talked about last week and moving forward, because Jayme has said to me before the show that he was even nervous about what's going on, and he feels like all the work we've been doing is going to be flushed down the toilet if people get on that Bernie and AOC bandwagon. Again, your thoughts, fam?
Well, I think that they're going after people who weren't around or who were really young because, you know, I understand because I was like around that age when Bernie came around. So it's just kind of like now they weren't around, so they're like the perfect target for, the establishment to come in and give false hope, and unfortunately that's what they're doing, and they're using the uh mechanisms of people like AOC and Bernie. And Bernie's not is still like somebody that, if you don't know what he did, he seems like a sane one in the Democratic Party or the surrounding of the Democratic Party. So they are attaching AOC, who is like the youthful one next to him, in an effort to kind of RFK Jr. try that with the Democratic Party. And because a lot of the younger Gen Z people, generation, not children, because I'd say like the oldest Gen Z is like 28 right now, and like the youngest are, I don't know, like 15 years younger than that. But they're using this same type of thing that they used on us, except the advantage we have now is that we have people who were around and still remember what happened. And we are so fragmented, I think, that I don't think it's going to stick that way. I don't think it's going to, there's so much that has happened. I think that we've just gone through it all. And I don't think a lot of us are going to just allow this to happen. I think there's a lot of us that really want to stop AOC, because we know this is about AOC. We know she's being pushed as that candidate, and she does embody all what people call the wokeism aspect of it, that when attached to people like us, it makes us angry because we're nothing like that. We really want nothing to do with that. But that is what the right uses to discount anything that we're talking about when it comes to immigration, or when it comes to any sort of social issue or any sort of economic issues that we're trying to achieve. When it comes to that, they use AOC to discount anything someone like us would say, right? That's what is left of the left is this concept. Like, we don't even know what that is. I don't think at this point in the US, and I speak solely for the US, it really matters what is left or right at this point, because it's just so discombobulated from everything that's happened that I don't align myself with what is considered left in the United States.
Yeah.
Economic wise, I am far, far left.
Yeah.
But when it comes to a lot of the other issues, there's no way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything flip-flopped, right? The Rock is now a good guy, and who's a bad guy now? Wait, The Rock is now a bad guy, excuse me. And your bad guys are good guys. You can do that. You can flip people. We learned that with Donald Trump, who is actually in the WWE Hall of Fame. So it doesn't surprise me that they tapped this guy to help with the sheepdogging operation on the right. And I think that the left was meant to go over the top, ridiculous culture war bullshit. You know what I'm saying? And AOC does lead that march of a bunch of young people who don't know about foreign policy. It still hurts me when I see people that I went to high school with that are, kind of duped by this. I saw a friend of mine say the other day, blame Putin. He's the one who wants to expand the old Soviet Union and stuff. It's like, you guys are just repeating stuff, and you get caught up in the team sports mentality. And it's really sad. As we get into the first topic, and because we're kind of tying into what we were used to talk about back in the days when we started the Convo Couch, it was to educate those people on foreign policy, because our foreign policy is our domestic policy. And what the empire does abroad, it will eventually come home and do it to its own citizens. The chickens will come home to roost. And the reason why I want to do this topic is because I grabbed the New York Times the other day. I got the blur on so you can't see. But it is the first article up there. And you got the nice table with all the diplomats, fam, there, Marco Rubio. But the first question I have to ask you as we break into it is who's the real enemy right here. I know a lot of people will point to Congress and the lawmakers and say they're awful. But the New York Times, which used to be considered leftist and liberal, and it used to be considered that leftism was about being anti-war. It's not that anymore. And the question I have to you is the press the real enemy of the people here? Because the way they frame this, and Jayme, you can put up the first article we have. Rubio says U.S. may quit Ukraine ceasefire talks. Threat to move on is the latest gift to Putin's cause. Once again, they say the threat to move on is the latest gift to Putin's cause. And it says go to A7. And this is just in the paper. When you look it up, I mean, the left right now, threat to move on from peace talks is the latest gifts to Putin's cause. So now you have the leftist paper, right? The liberal paper being pro-war. I don't know how much I'm going to read of this, fam. You can stop me anytime, but there's a lot of points to make. But I want to just argue, number one, that the press is the enemy of the people. They really are. I don't know who even reads this stuff anymore. I get it to be entertained to see what they're trying to push. But both sides are pro-war. Rubio says the U.S. To decide in days. I can't read that, buddy. I was reading the title. Jesus, Jayme. Rubio says the U.S. to decide in days if end to war in Ukraine is doable, fam. If it's not possible to end the war in Ukraine, we need to move on, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said as he departed meetings in Paris. Want to remind everybody, 99-0, this man was confirmed. Even Bernie Sanders, even Bernard Sanders voted for this guy. High-level talks Thursday in Paris between American, European, and Ukrainian officials. I do want to point out as we get into this that Europe is kind of a side note, right? And the real talks are between Russia and the United States via NATO, right? The United States was the main funder of this war, and I said this before from the get-go. There's a lot of people on the populist right, fam, that were against this war because they can frame it as Biden's war. Well, as supposedly it hasn't been ended in 24 hours, you hear now Donald Trump mention almost all the time, like clockwork, fam, this was Biden's war. This was Biden's war. I didn't want to have war with Russia. I wanted to have war with China. And Biden started this war. And if I was the president, if they didn't steal the election from me, this would have never happened. They keep mentioning that over and over and over again. But the odd thing is that a lot of people look at this and they're like, wow, Donald Trump has got pie on his face. He didn't end it in 24 hours. Now they're talking about walking away. One of my other notes say, and this is why it was so important, I could not do this show today without you. This show was so important for you to give your opinion on because you have such an interesting perspective. And you've been right about most of these things, right? Like Venezuela, as people were saying, oh my God, there's going to be relationships between the United States and Venezuela. They're fixing that. You kept on saying, and look where we're at. Now Donald Trump is threatening anybody who does business with Venezuela that he's going to sanction that country. So once again, fam was right. And I think the question is, as we get into this, was there, and right now, is it happening? Is there some type of deal taking place? Because we're getting mixed signals. Because as we see today, very different than this one. First of all, I don't even know what you mean by walk away, fam. What is it? We're going to walk away. We're not going to fund you anymore. We're going to walk away and go back to funding you. Because Donald Trump said he can end it in 24 hours. And he hasn't funded this war the way Biden has. But he's still giving the Ukrainians $1 billion. Yeah, he says there's going to be no new contracts or new deals. But this is so confusing and so hard to unpack. I think for the average eye, there will be a lot of questions. Do you want to say anything before I start reading? Or do you have I know I threw a lot out there because there's a lot to unpack here.
I'll first say that I think the media are a tool used by the enemies of the people. Yes, in a way they are the enemies, but they are a tool used by the machine, right? They're not the main aspect. They are essentially now PR for the empire, and that's all they are. And so you have to understand what PR is and what they want to present versus what actually is happening behind the scenes. And there's a lot of diplomatic BS that happens when it comes to governments and when it comes to showing that certain things are happening. But What we really have to look at is what's happening behind the scenes and what's actually the driven factors, who benefits from an end to the war in Ukraine. And I don't believe that the United States wants to continue this war simply because they are on the losing end. And Trump's job is to make it look like it is a success. This is what he ran on, this is what he campaigned on. And the US cannot wage war with China, even on an economic level, do all of this threatening with Iran, and simultaneously focus on Russia. And what they're trying to do with Russia is build a wedge between them and China, which isn't working clearly. But that doesn't mean they're not going to try, and that it isn't within the realm of possibility that Russia is very interested in ending this war. And they are. Russia is extremely interested in ending this war. They don't want it anymore. And this is counter to what you're hearing from a lot of analysts that say Russia just wants to take over everything. They want to go and take over Kiev. They're going to just take everything. That was never their intention. Their intention was just to secure their borders, secure their security interests in the region, and to push out NATO from where they had originally said they wouldn't go beyond. And if they have done that already, if the special military operation has met the majority of its objectives, the Russian government, as pragmatic as it is, it's not going to seek something more. They, in fact, want to reestablish relations with the United States. They want, more than anything, economic relations. It's not even about the sanctions as much, and we've heard this from Russian officials, as much as it is about the ability to just continue building and advancing their national interests. And that's all that's what this is about, really. There's a lot of applying ideology into Russia, and I keep saying this, they are not the Soviet Union, and people need to understand what I mean by that. They are a pragmatic government interested in ensuring their security, gaining economic progress. We see it in Syria. We're watching it in Syria right now, as they may take hold of several areas in Syria. And that's something that they've been negotiating with both Israel and the United States. And both of these countries prefer to have Russia there than Turkey, especially Israel. So we have seen this scenario happen. We have seen them also expand their networking in Africa as well. And Venezuela will still hold Russia as an ally, even if obviously they don't share that resistance ideological bond. Same with Iran. But Russia is still a major player in terms of the geopolitics of it all, right? Yeah. And so I don't see that Russia will not take a deal. I think they're not going to take something that's absolutely doesn't give them what they already gained. For example, Donbass, obviously Crimea is out of the question. It's been for years. And all of the gained territories and security guarantees. But I just don't see them backing away that easily. I think this is just a back and forth that we're seeing between Trump and Rubio to kind of make it look like, things are, we're puffing our chest of sorts, right? That if Russia doesn't do what we want, then, we're going to back away. But in reality, they have the upper hand in order to negotiate.
Russia.
Yeah.
I you see that meme out there with Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. He goes, "You want to know what cards I'm holding?" And Xi's going, "Those cards were made in China." You know what I'm saying? I'd like to see a meme out there too as well, because, as we get into this article and some of the other things I've pointed out, that even since Donald Trump's presidency has begun, right? And he said he would end this war, and he immediately put it on the table. Well, we don't like the people he was kind of tapping on the shoulder to go over and speak. They're really not of the peace mind. Stephen Witikoff. Is it Witikoff or Witkoff? I can't even say his name. I think it's Witikoff. Obviously I like him a little bit more, even though he's a New York State developer. He doesn't seem to have that kind of Cold War anti-Russian mentality that Colonel Clark Kellogg has, who he first tapped to go over there, that Marco Rubio has, that Walsh has. I mean, these are like hardcore neocons that were for this war when Donald Trump was in office. So, we have that going on. But I do have a couple questions for you. You answered the first part of the question. And just a quick yes or no, because I don't want to get kind of hung up on this. You said that the press isn't really the enemy of the people. They're simply the stenographers for the ruling class. I hold the cards. The cards were made in China, right? I love that one. Putin's like, I hold these cards. Trump could be, I hold these cards. And Putin goes, no. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what can be done, but it's the same thing. They're not going to capitulate to what the West wants. And obviously, I think right now, there at least appears to be differences of what the West wants between, Donald Trump and Europe. It seems to me that Donald Trump wants this off his hands. Like, he don't want to deal with this anymore. He's got other wars to worry about now, fam. He's got Yemen. He's got to continue to supply the Israeli regime with whatever they want so they can take more of Syria. So, they want to go after Iran. Donald Trump wants to wipe this off his hands, but as soon as he scolded Zelensky went to Europe and he was coddled by all these other leaders in Europe. And they were like, don't worry, we'll get you back. We'll take care of you. But they can't fill the void that the Americans, would leave behind if the United States were to stop funding this war. They're the major funders of this war, the United States, and they even have a hard time keeping up with Russia, right? Europe can't fill that void. So that's one thing. But really quickly, the press. Stenographers for the ruling class. But doesn't that make them just as guilty? Doesn't that make them evil too as well, since they are performing that? I mean, the major job of the Fourth Estate is to hold power accountable, is hold the government accountable. So even if they are the ones, and I get it, that all the corporate entities own all these newspapers, aren't the reporters who write this crap, who put this kind of notion out there, aren't they just as guilty of the people who paying them?
I mean, to a certain extent. But what I'm saying is we have to get to the bottom of like the core of the problem. And I think these are tools and consequences, but not the core of the octopus. We're talking about the major.
It's the symptom. It's not the actual cause. I get you. All right, cool. I just wanted to know that because I still want to yell at these fucking people on a regular basis, especially the new media. I love yelling at Nick Sorter, Benny Johnson, and all these jerk-offs every day. And I will say their names every day because Elon is promoting them and lifting them. There's no way these idiots can get the views they get. The redheaded libertarian, she's the newest one too as well. All right, so the backdoor deals you're talking about. You said there were some backdoor deals going on. You said that Russia desperately wants, not desperately, but they want to end it. I think United States, I think the Trump campaign wants to end this more desperately than the Russians do. In other words, as we go into the stories today and we talk about it, Russia keeps taking more territory. They haven't stopped and they keep pushing through. And in fact, Ukraine is still having a hard time finding soldiers, right? You see the videos of them just showing up and grabbing people, throwing them in a van and taking them off to the front line. I heard there was this commercial they made where they were saying, they were offering these big bonuses and they were saying, how many Big Macs you can get with that money? It was kind of weird. I saw that, but they're having a hard time getting people. Whereas if in Russia, they're not having the same problems. I remember when I was going, I kind of pushed back on Dr. Cornel West about this. I'm like, why are you listening to these West stories? The people in Russia are standing behind this war more than the Ukrainian people are standing behind the war for them. And from what I understand, that there's a big influx of troops that will be coming. The people that were recruited that signed up to fight this war haven't even made it to the front line yet. They're almost trained. It's ready. They're coming. They're taking more territory. So yes, even though Russia wants to end this war, because I'm sure there's some blowback and pushback as they've lost close to 100,000 troops, but at what cost do they want to end this war? The ruble is doing better than gold. Their economy is thriving, right? I mean, so even though, and that's the thing, Donald Trump, once again, I'm going to throw more sanctions. Russia's like, I don't care. We've already done this. We got rid of Starbucks. We replaced it. We got rid of McDonald's. We replaced it. We hold the resources, pal. We don't need your stuff anymore. We got new customers we can sell our oil to. Do what you want to do. Yeah, be nice to do business with the big guy, because then we can overcharge you and you'll pay for it, right? But at what cost do they want to do business, fam? That being Russia, because it seems like they hold all the cards here too.
Well, there's a difference between what the government wants and what the average person in Russia wants. And most of the time, when you have analysis, you just get the government perspective of Russia. You don't really get the people perspective. And there is a desire to end the war. There's war fatigue. There is high inflation here as well. That does affect people. Yes, the ruble is doing amazing at an international level, at a level where, you know, Russia has turned the sanctions into something that they've not only survived but thrived on in terms of in the national currency of the ruble and the international economic exchange that Russia has engaged in. As you talked about, Starbucks, McDonald's, all of these things, Russia has been able to just deal with it. But this is because they prepared a long time ago to deal with it, kind of like how Nicaragua prepared for having food sovereignty. Russia prepared for this, and they knew exactly what to do. And so it hasn't been as bad as it could be, but there are still consequences to a war beyond, obviously, the hundreds of thousands lost. There is the traveling aspect. The sanctions still did push some businesses out. There is the inflation that's occurred within the country. There's a lot of things that have happened. And overall, in order to maintain a population, in spite of the fact that many, of course, did back the special military operation, even like maybe there was fear from some in the beginning, a lot of those people did end up returning to Russia. So even though initially it did affect a lot of people did come back, but it's not a picture of everything is, you know, roses and happiness. It's a picture of reality where you have war is still affecting people. It's still affecting many, and there is no need to continue because their objective was never to take over all of Ukraine. Their objective was to just secure their interest and get rid of the neo-Nazi air populations that were killing their people because they were a threat to their national security. This is why Putin took a long time to go into the war. He didn't do it for a long time. Yeah. So it's not that they don't have the ability to do it. It's that it's not necessary. It is not something they're looking to do. What I think the US is doing is dragging it out like they dragged out Afghanistan in order for it to gain perception that, you know, there's still some sort of success, some sort of like PR. Yeah. They're waiting to see how they can get out of this and make it look like it's not as bad as it actually is. But it really is a loss for the United States, especially for Europe, obviously. Yes. But the US doesn't care about Europe. They've said it as much. And Europe is done. Europe, you travel to Europe right now, and it is not what it used to be. And it is not. It is what Russia is becoming is what Europe was, I would say. And so they obviously now have another layer of anger towards Russia and Moscow and its development. It's still in its young stages of capital. It's not in the same sense where we are in the US. We're at a decline full on. And so there are differences in that, but what I do think is the attempt of the US is to wait it out, right? But I think Trump has to deliver. And if he doesn't deliver on this war, it's just not gonna fly, because he's pushing when it comes to Israel, when it comes to Iran, when it comes to China, all of that is happening. And Yemen, there has to be some sort of, okay, I'm Trump, I'm bringing peace to Russia. And he has a much better relationship with Putin than at least in apparent terms, right? Then
Biden didn't even speak to him. I mean, it's like,
But this is Trump's role, is what I'm saying. This is Trump's role to end it here and move it over there. And I think that will happen.
It's funny you said that, like, they're going to drag it out and then, make it appear like they got some type of victory. Donald Trump is the only guy, to make an analogy, he's the only guy that can get knocked out and then stand up and act like he won. Let's get to the article real quick. And fam, my first question to you will be, after we get into this article, is what will Ukraine exist when this is all said and done? And what will it look like? Let's get into the article. The United States will abandon efforts to end to end the war in Ukraine if it proves impossible to broker meaningful progress in the next several days, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said as he departed from Paris on Friday, a day after meeting with President Emmanuel Macron of France. If it is not possible to end the war in Ukraine, we need to move on, Mr. Rubio told reporters, adding that the Trump administration would decide in a matter of days whether or not this is doable in the next few weeks. It was not entirely clear from Mr. Rubio's remarks whether he meant that the United States would merely abandon its efforts to reach a 30-day ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, President Trump's immediate focus, or abandon Washington's commitments to Ukraine altogether. That's something that when you look at that, you say to yourself, well, what does it mean when we're just going to walk away? But his remarks ratcheted up pressure on both sides to end the war and appeared intended to inject urgency into European efforts to prod Vladimir Green Screen Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, towards compromise. While the United States is Russia's chief interlocutor in the negotiations, Europe has far greater sway over Mr. Zelensky. Mr. Trump said on Thursday that he was not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of the Ukrainian leader. By contrast, speaking of his relationships with President Vladimir V. Putin, what does V stand for? Of Russia during what?
Vladimirovich
Putin of Russia during his first term, Mr. Trump said that I was the apple of his eye, fam. I mean, look at the way, once again, the enemy of the people, I say, the stenographers for the ruling class, the way they frame it. The liberal media, right? The New York Times is now completely pro-war. No peace with Russia. Mr. Rubio said Mr. Trump spent 87 days at the highest level of this government, repeatedly making efforts to bring this war to an end. We are now reaching a point where we need to decide and determine whether this is even possible or not. Responding to Mr. Rubio's comments, the Kremlin signaled that it was in no hurry for a ceasefire, a consistent message from Moscow throughout Mr. Trump's attempt to end the war. Once again, they're holding all the cards. This is not friggin' Afghanistan, ladies and gentlemen, where we can fund the Mujahideen, give them Stinger missiles, and say, take care of them, right? This is a completely different situation. There is historical context between Ukraine and Russia. It's different terrain. And there was never a chance for Ukraine to ever win this war. Never. So it was really, to tell you the truth, when you talk about the other part of the enemy of the people, the lawmakers, a lot of them should really go to jail for what they're doing. I mean, I know it wasn't a bunch of Americans that died in this war, but, when you're talking about 600,000 Ukrainians and you're talking about 100,000 Russians, those lives are precious and they're never talked about. In fact, this American exceptionalism we have across the board, Republican and Democrat, to think that life is less valuable than an American life really grinds my gears. High-level talks on Thursday between American, European, and Ukrainian officials were the first of their kind, intended to bring convergence between the views of war in Washington and European capitals. Mr. Rubio said the conversations had been constructive, but appeared clear that Mr. Trump was losing patience. During the talks, a broad framework for peace, in effect, an American plan, was presented to Ukraine. It's a framework that gets us into the position to see, look, there are going to be differences. There's no one saying this can be done in 12 hours, Mr. Rubio said. He declined to give any further details of the proposal. It's not our war. We didn't start it, Mr. Rubio said. Like I said all the time now, fam, it was crazy because so many times that we would sit there and we would look at people and we would say this for years, like, okay, we're not being fooled by the populist right people who are like, oh, we're anti-war. Trump's the peace candidate. No, you were okay saying you were against this war because you could frame it as Biden's war. Here we go, Rubio and Donald Trump. Not a single time that he talks to the press and he talks about Ukraine will he not mention that this is Biden's war. Something we said on this channel a long long time ago. I'm going to read that again. Mr. Rubio, wait. This is not our war. We didn't start it, Mr. Rubio said. The United States has been helping Ukraine for the past 3 years, and we want to end it. But it's not our war. Yes, it is. The United States government funded. It's your friggin' war. He added, if it's not possible, if we're so far apart that this is not going to happen, then I think the president's probably at a point where he's going to say, well, we're done here. Back up. Let's go home. We're out of here. Let's go pay attention to China. We'll do what we can do on the margins. He described Mr. Trump as feeling very strongly about this. Mr. Rubio and Steve Witkoff, this is the person we talked about, Mr. Trump's envoy, have led the American diplomacy aimed at ending the war, which has festered for more than 3 years. Mr. Witkoff has met with Mr. Putin multiple times and said he was trying to develop a friendship, a relationship with the Russian leader. But Mr. Putin has balked, setting various conditions even for a 30-day ceasefire. The Russian bombardment of Ukraine continues. Asked whether Russian plan to respond to a ceasefire offer from Mr. Trump this week, Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesperson, said ending the war was not a simple topic and that Russia was seeking a settlement that would ensure its own interest. We're open for dialogue, Mr. Peskov said. There are already certain developments, but many difficult discussions lie ahead. Mr. Peskov described the 1-month moratorium on strikes on energy infrastructures that expired this week as an example of certain progress. He said that while the 30-day time frame had expired, Mr. Putin had not made any other orders, leaving ambiguous whether that meant the Kremlin would consider the moratorium still in force or would consider it justified to renewed military strike. Both Russia and Ukraine have accused each other of violating this agreement. What a surprise there, fam. There was no immediate official reaction from Kiev to Mr. Rubio's remarks, which appeared jolting after strained efforts on Thursday to demonstrate harmony between American and European approaches to the war. Fam, I just want to stop right there because I don't want to get into this next part over there. But I mean, that pretty much says the crux of what's going on. It's like I said, Putin's holding all the cards. He wanted certain arrangements. When Donald Trump said a couple weeks ago that he was mad, today he says everything's going great. But when he was mad at Putin, he was mad when Putin said, well, we need some type of transitional government. Volodymyr Zelensky got to go. And supposedly, after Donald Trump had belittled Zelensky, called him a dictator, all of a sudden, Donald Trump is now standing up for Zelensky. So when you look at this right now, when you see that, and one article, can you pull up the next article really quickly in Reuters? Because over the weekend, of course, both sides argued that they each broke the ceasefire. If you just go down to the bottom part real quick, because they say all these things, they argue, they want to act like, oh my God, Russia's breaking the ceasefire. What's wrong with them? Go up a little bit. I'm sorry. Right there. Hold on. Right there. Okay. The very bottom line, the defense ministry also said that Russia had gained control, and I can't say that word, fam, in eastern Ukraine before the declaration of the ceasefire. They kind of just try to slip it in, right? So here they are arguing, oh my God, Russia, they're evil. They're bombing again during a ceasefire on Easter. Meanwhile, we know what Ukraine has done. But now they're kind of just, and they're just so passé about it. And it was in several articles in the Guardians. Oh, the ministry also said that Russian military had gained control of this eastern Ukraine area before the declaration of ceasefire. Fam, you look at these maps that they show this area, Russia keeps expanding their territory. Right? They got a straight line right now from here, from where they're at, right to Kiev if they want. So my first question is, what do you make of all this jumbo mumbo when you hear all these talks going back and forth? You know what I'm saying? You still think there's some type of, this is all just posturing, political posturing. But I still, political posturing or not, I don't understand. I can't see how the Russian government will allow Kiev to exist in its current form, right? I mean, you got Banderites there, Stefan Bandera, Nazis who hate these Russian people. You got streets named after these Banderites. They're still all within the government. How does Moscow walk away and let Kiev exist the way it is right now. Even if they take all the territory they controlled and say, you're not getting it back. Screw you, right? We still got the minerals thing that's going on, where I think plays a big part of what's going on. And we have the fact that this is still a Nazi-infested government. How does Moscow let this exist?
But Moscow isn't an ideological, they're not an ideological government.
But they'll always be a threat to them, fam.
The Nazis? The
Yes.
Nazis would be nothing without Victoria Nuland and the US and NATO coming in there and giving them the impetus and the weapons and all of that.
But Putin did say he wanted to denazify that government.
Yeah, he did say that. But where is their power at this point? If Russia gets the victory, which they already have one, right? If they get a negotiation, a ceasefire negotiation, they are going to be the ones with the upper hand. They're going to be the ones in control. They're going to ask for the denazification to continue. They're going to ask for some sort of security guarantees in regard to the Nazis in the neo-Nazis that exist in these areas. But their intention was never to take all of Kiev. I mean, I would be very surprised if that was the case. Not because they can't, but because it was just not the intention. And why? They don't need that. They don't need Kiev. They don't need Ukraine. I think Ukraine will continue to exist, but it's no longer what it was before. It is completely depleted of power. It is completely depleted of everything. I mean, it is never going to be what it was before. But what is going to happen is this war, I don't believe, is going to end. I think it's going to be pushed down the line. So what I'm saying is they might reach a truce. They might reach some sort of end to the Russia-Ukraine war. But make no mistake, the moment a Democrat comes in, it's going to be their job to continue this. Yeah. They want to balkanize Russia. They will not stop until they balkanize Russia. And if Russia, for 1 second, takes the Trump administration at their word, just as it always happens with Trump coming in, they have an affinity here for Donald Trump. Like they buy into a lot of what the Republicans say. That is a fact. That is not up for debate. There is a much more receptive attitude when it comes to the Conservative Party. And that is a mistake. It is a mistake that they would be making in pretending or in thinking that they're any different than the Biden administration, that this isn't a policy of continuity. That doesn't change the fact that they do want an end to the war. They may say they're not in a rush, but they're not in a rush to not get everything they want. They want to get all of their guarantees. But if you look at what's happening with Stephen Witkoff coming here all the time and behind the scenes, and then you look at who Rubio is saying this to about, we're going to pull out. He's telling Europe that. He's talking to Macron. He needs to pacify Europe. They need to get Europe to calm the hell down, because Europe is far more anti-Russian right now than the United States. The United States just wants this done. Europe got screwed, including the UK. So that's why they're extremely Russophobic. But when we look
I just want to say, fam, really quickly that before we move on from that, the Americans are still Russophobic. The Democrats are still trying to reignite the whole Russiagate story all over again. Rahm Emanuel was on Bill Maher a couple weeks ago. I talked about it with Peter Lavelle. He goes, they're trying to reincarnate the whole Russiagate story again. It's like they won't let go. So I don't think that when you say, okay,
but you need to understand that things have shifted at an international level when it comes to, for example, travel between Russia and the United States. That's shifted.
Yeah.
It's shifted 100%. I can tell you that. There is definitely something happening. And the thing is, if you separate Democrats from Republicans in the sense that, the Democrats are the Russophobic ones, not really. The image here has to be one of resolving the crisis for Donald Trump, because that is what he campaigned on. They will resolve things with Russia, but they will never resolve things with Iran unless Iran becomes subjugated to them. And the Russians will be the focus of the Democratic Party. But it's essentially, when we talk about the uniparty, it's essentially they take turns. And you know this very well. It is not just, oh, the Democrats are Russophobic. It's literally our entire desire has always been to balkanize Russia. And
Yeah.
it is such a vast territory that that's not going to stop. It's just
Yeah.
going to be pushed aside until they have the given moment to continue doing it. So while we're
Yeah.
arguing about, how quickly this will end, I think it'll end soon.
Yeah.
Sooner
Put up that
rather.
article for Fiorella so she can prove her little point when she says this is going to end soon. The next article about the meetings today, because it here you are, fam.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Trump is hoping that there will be a deal this week because Vladimir Putin entered this 30-hour truce for Easter. But what ends up happening is that there's still attacks from Ukraine. There are still various drone attacks in Crimea. So Ukraine is still playing the role of like, oh yeah, we're going to attack Crimea and we're going to continue pushing this. Zelensky has no other choice but to continue playing the role that they even have a shot. This is over. It's already done. It's just a matter of like putting it in a box, putting a bow on it, and that's it. But it's not going to go away entirely, is what I'm saying. We will return to this issue, even if there is a resolution, because I don't think the U.S. will rest until Russia is in one way or another under their control. There's so much territory there, so many minerals, so much industry that's untapped.
Yeah.
And if they wanted that little sliver of Ukraine, that is nothing compared to what Russia is. And so
I think, fam, too, because when the Clintons were in there, you remember the Bill and Hillary walking with, what's his name, the fall down drunk Boris Yeltsin, when they got into Russia, they got a little taste of that Russian love, fam, and they want it back. Once you taste that Russian vodka, all the other ones are just not as good, and they want it back. It was especially the Democrats, right? It was Bill Clinton who bombed Belgrade, who went against what a lot of hardliners in Russia hated. But Boris Yeltsin let them do it, and they let them the balkanization was on. And Bill Clinton was walking around like, I'm the granddaddy who did it. This was me, baby, with Hillary. But then they brought Vladimir Putin into play, and things changed. And he was a pure nationalist from the point of view that he was going to do what was best for Russia. And he knew that, okay, they're not going to go back to the old Soviet Union. They're not going to go back to that style, but they're going to make sure that they control a lot of their resources, that they take care of their own people. They're not just going to completely depend upon the West. And that enraged the Clintons and the Democratic Party. So, it doesn't surprise me that they're not stopping with the same old attacks. Plus, what else could they do? Who else could they blame? They like to blame Russia for everything, so you don't look at their... And it works sometimes. Like I told you, like there's a lot of people on my Facebook in particular, my old school people from high school that will just buy into this whole thing, that will curse Putin as if he's like Thanos and he's the devil and stuff, when they just don't understand what exactly is going on. You got anything else before we wrap up this section? Because we took a long time on this one. I took a long time.
Yeah, Pasta. I was just going to say.
This is important. It's important, fam. This is like, come on. This war's been going on for a long time. We see this stuff all in the New York Times. I mean, it was important to impact the point of view, because you've gotten a lot of these things right. And I want to make sure that you get this out here, so when it happens again, we have that I told you so moment.
So can we just listen to what Donald Trump said? Because like I was saying, and Rubio is talking to one sector of the public and Trump is talking to another. It's not that they're against each other. They're actually, I mean,
good cop, bad cop
together. It's just that they're talking to different people. So this is what Donald Trump said. He, when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine deal, he said that there's a very good chance that there could be a deal this week. So let's hear it from him.
The horse's mouth.
Yeah, well, you got it.
If that's the tweet that you had in the doc, it's gone. It was deleted off of Twitter.
Oh, that's weird. Are you sure? Let me see if I can. I see. It was just reposted in a different. Let me.
But while fam's getting it up, I just want to point out that I'm glad. See, once again, I couldn't do the show without you today because, listen, Rubio was talking to Europe, and Donald Trump is talking to somebody else. He's talking directly with Russia, and Rubio was talking to Europe. I mean, that's good. That's great. It makes sense now that he's telling Europe, like, look, you want to try, because after Volodymyr Green Screen Zelensky had left Donald Trump and had the lashing, he got corralled and coddled, right, by the Europeans. Like, don't worry about that. Way to stand up to J.D. Vance and Daddy Trump. We got your back, as if they're going to fund this war without the United States. Not going to happen. CheeseSlice, you got it, baby?
He's getting it. He's getting it. Yeah, there's a difference. I mean, I think they're playing, they're playing this game like tit for tat, but the desire to end the war is strong here as it is, I think, in the U.S.
This week, do you think Russia and Ukraine can get a deal?
Yes, there's a very good chance.
Are you happy with
Russia and Ukraine getting a deal this week? Do you think Russia and Ukraine can get a deal?
Yes, there's a very good chance.
Are you happy?
See, we don't. So I think people need to stop getting caught up into exactly the he said, she said, and look at how many times Witkoff has been to Moscow. Countless times. It's endless. And the Kremlin is willing. They've been willing for a long time to end this war. I mean, they've literally didn't want it to happen for the longest time. So there is no doubt in my mind that Russia wants to end this, but they're not going to end it by looking like weak. They are the ones holding the cards, and they're going to make sure that they get everything they need before that happens. However, I still don't think that a deal with the devil is something they can just back off. I think they need to take from the lessons from before and understand that the U.S. is never going to back off. They are not going to back off when it comes to Russia. It's just so vast and huge. It's not going to be a thing. And they see it as the deterrence to China. So eventually we will revisit this, even if we do resolve the issue. So,
yeah. Guys, all the way the supporters are listed down below. That's it for that section. I think we kind of unpacked it. Like I said, for me, this is important to get Fee's perspective out there, because I keep on looking at this whole situation and was like, a lot of us think that, thought that this could turn into Trump's Vietnam. Because, when he was getting mad at Putin, it was like, for him to say that he would end it in 24 hours, it's like, oh, that's just ridiculous. You haven't been paying attention. You're not going to come in and just, dictate the terms. Russia's got the boot on Ukraine's neck and the West's neck. And I think a lot of this, too, was, a lot of the generals and all the ruling class, they wanted a war with Russia to see what they got, to see where Russians' military is. I think a lot of the stuff that's going on in Gaza, there's new bombs being dropped, there's new testings of weapons. And I think that the ruling class, when we talk about Oceania versus Eurasia, I think they wanted to see what Eurasia has, what weapons. And I think they learned quickly that, Russia's got one of the strongest militaries in the world right now. So, maybe they saw what they needed to see, but they're moving on. And like I said, and you've said, I think there's a lot of desire from both sides to end the war and sanctions to be lifted, right? We want American journalists like Rick Sanchez, who went on Tucker Carlson's show, to get back to work. And, whether you like them or not, and like you said, did you say ruling class? Yes, I did. Ruling class. What was I saying? I was talking about the, it's not all roses over there in Russia, but Rick Sanchez said there's more journalistic freedom that he had working for RT than any of the networks. And he worked for CNN. He worked for MSNBC. So hopefully we can get a lot of American people back to work. I feel for a lot of those people, especially a lot of the Sputnik people. Jamal Charles just did is it Jamal Charles or Jamal, what's his name? Jamal Thomas. I always call him. Jamal Charles is a running back for the Kansas City Chiefs. Jamal Thomas is a DC guy who was on Sputnik for many years. He did a video the other day where he called out Scott Ritter for Scott Ritter's position on Iran. And, I was very proud of him for doing that because he even said, Scott Ritter was a friend of the show. He went on his show a lot, but he had to call out Scott Ritter for his positions on Iran right now, because Scott Ritter, unfortunately, has a little bit too much of the hero worshiping of Donald Trump. A little bit too much. It's changed his perspective on a lot of issues. But I was really proud of Jamal for doing that. And he had that video. He called him out. He talked about it. He explained the reasons why. And I've had differences with Jamal over the years over different issues. But when we have journalists like that out there that lose a job because of the sanctions, Malika Abdul, him too, Garland Nixon, these people need to get back to work, and they deserve to get back to work. So I hope that they can also lift these sanctions and get these people back to work. We'll see. I hope it happens sooner than later. And of course, across the board, fam, I don't want these people to die anymore. This is ridiculous. Like the American exceptionalism, excuse me, the American exceptionalism just turns a blind eye on Ukrainians and Russians dying. That's terrible. It's awful, and we need to end it. So let's move on. You guys know about the ways to help the show down below. Go ahead and click it. Donate, help out. Any way you can get us off the ground. You know the work we do. It's more value. It's more important now, and we need to keep this valuable resource going. So please help out any way you can. Fam, we talked about maybe a positive thing that Donald Trump is going to be able to do in this situation. Let's talk about the disgustingness. All the constitutionalists, fam. Remember all the Trump people? We believe in the Constitution, and they hold up their little Constitution and stuff. Where are the constitutionalists now, where it says that all people, not just legal people or legal residents, but all people are entitled to life, liberty, property in the name of due process, right? They're allowed to have due process. And now due process is out the window, fam, as they just start picking people off the streets and throwing them out. And the thing that's really hard, I know you'll piggyback on this, is that everything they're doing to these people that are supposedly illegal, they'll be able to do to you.
Yeah, so Jayme, let's bring up the first tweet, please. So there have been several instances now, and this is something we warned all of you about. And I know we've been screaming about this because we knew that the technology, the surveillance, the AI, all of these things that were being used at the border were eventually going to be used on Americans, and that was going to happen. But what's happened is a step further in terms of what's happening with El Salvador. And I'll go on record saying that I wasn't a fan of Bukele from the start, unlike some present company. But this is actually true. I have an aunt who's a U.S. citizen, and she was stopped and asked in Florida for her papers based on probably her name, her last name. She has like a Latin name. But I mean, at least she was asked. She wasn't taken, right? But this is getting out of hand here. They're literally grabbing people with certain names and just like sending them different places. And eventually everybody might end up at the El Salvador prison. So let me read what Gritty is the Way said. One of my favorite accounts, by the way. He said, U.S. citizen held by ICE despite the judge seeing a birth certificate. So not only is this person not even, imagine if they were a naturalized citizen. They were born in the United States. This is crazy. This is crazy. What's happening now is there is this desire to just go unchecked on a lot of these things. And you can go ahead. Well, let me read this first and then we'll go to the next one. An American citizen was held in Florida jail at the request of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, despite the county judge being able to see the man's U.S. birth certificate in court. Juan Carlos Lopez Gomez, and when you have a name like that, who was born in the United States, was detained Wednesday in Florida by the state's highway patrol and was charged with illegally entering the Sunshine State as an unauthorized alien under a state law that had been temporarily blocked by a judge. So, y'all, this person was born in the U.S. Where is then the what is it? If we're talking about law and order, where's the law and where's the order? That's chaos. If you're just gonna grab people and you're gonna verify that they're Americans and you're still gonna go through with it. So what exactly is going on here? You say due process doesn't apply to illegal aliens, as they say. It doesn't apply maybe to residents with a green card now. But it also doesn't apply to U.S. citizens. What exactly is the crime committed? I thought we were innocent until proven guilty. I thought there was a justice system. I'm being cynical here because I know that we have an injustice system, and most of the time people are guilty until proven innocent. But this is showing you how far this can go, and of course, backed, I'll repeat, with the statement from both Trump and his press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, who talked about a possibility of sending U.S. born citizen or U.S. citizen who have a criminal record that is extensive into these prisons in El Salvador because it's good for business. I mean,
it's cheaper, fam.
Where are we headed? I mean, we're already there. We're already in an oligarchy. We're already in a fascistic type of society. But I think the thing is, the prison itself is ample. There's a lot of tricks and a lot of distractions in this prison, but nevertheless, it's becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And by the time people realize it, I think it'll be too late. This is not good for anybody. This isn't good no matter where, if you consider yourself a Republican, if you consider yourself a Democrat, if you want border control, none of this is good. None of this is absolutely good at all, because this is now multiple violations, multiple precedents being sent. Fam, you have something to say on that, Jayme, while you get the next one up?
Well, the thing is that I think that I really want to piggyback on the point. We see a lot of people who are kind of feeling like this is payback for what happened when Biden was the president for so long, right? Like now they can pay it back. But what happens when the other side is in charge and they're using the same powers that you are using without any pushback? There needs to be pushback from Donald Trump's own base. It really does. It drives me crazy that it's justified. And I'm going to call it like it is, fam. I'm not going to use the word xenophobic anymore. It's racism. It's racism. You're okay with these people getting picked up and deported because they're brown. That's why you're okay with it. Plain and simple. And I don't like to use that word because the Democrats weaponize it every step of the way. This is plain, good old-fashioned racism. You either care for the Constitution or you don't, right? You either care for law and order or you don't. Not just when it's picking up a bunch of immigrants and taking them there. Nobody will cry for this guy. And the guy that they accidentally deported and he still hasn't come back yet, and Bukele, once again, egg on my face, who was like, well, I can't release him and we're not in the habit of releasing him. And like, no, it's a bunch of bullshit as he has his nose so far up Donald Trump's ass. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, and I just want to read this tweet because this is going back to the U.S. citizen thing. And maybe this is the only way, it's wrong, period, whether you're whatever, right? But this is the way to get you or anybody who's an American to understand this is going to just get worse. So this person said they won't come for U.S. citizens, quoting somebody. They said, now ICE just arrested and detained a U.S.-born man in Florida with his birth certificate in hand. Judge won't release him because it's out of her jurisdiction, because he had an ICE hold. Still think we're exaggerating.
That's dangerous. Right? The federal government can do that shit, by the way.
Do we have to carry around our birth certificate or certificate of naturalization? Do you have to carry around your green card? What about all the people that were saying, what about the COVID? And you have to put your papers and show your papers and all of this. Well, what is it? This is even worse, because now they can there's a.
You knocked your microphone out.
There's a boring process. Like there's no law like happening here. There's no legal process at all. And now that we've eradicated that, it's once you get rid of these freedoms, they don't come back. When's the last time you saw anything that we lost from the Patriot Act come back? We haven't seen it. Everything's just getting less and less and less. So yeah, I'm actually quite frightened that this has happened. And this is actually a valid criticism of this administration. But make no mistake that everything Biden did allowed Trump to do this, and everything that Trump did prior Obama. This isn't just a partisan thing. They're making it look like that. Same with the wars. But this is all part of the establishment of empire. This is how they're going to operate, because now you have AOC, Bernie, Nancy Pelosi coming in, acting like it's Trump. That's the problem. When in reality, it's the entire system set up to allow this to happen. So don't make it about Trump or Biden. It's about the empire, the international, the national security state apparatus, the military industrial complex, these things together, the intelligence apparatus, all of that. That is what's really truly behind this, because the more easily they can get people to allow this for X person or that person that they don't like on whatever team it is on the given day, the less rights we will all have. And that's precisely why so many people are like, all right, that's it. Bye. I'm leaving the US. Whatever's going on is not what I would be a part of.
Fam, can I say this much too as well? That the thing that really grinds my gears is the fact that a lot of people thought that the Donald Trump administration, they'll still argue it, that it's about bucking the system. No, it's not. It was never about bucking the system. It's reinforcing the system by stating that it was just mismanaged. They don't want to get rid of anything. I mean, that and every day we see now Doge gets less and less and less. It was 2 trillion, then it was 1 trillion. Now it's a couple hundred billion. It's like less than 200 billion. And where is that money going to be reallocated? The Speaker Mike Johnson's Republican budget was ridiculous. Donald Trump said he wanted to primary Thomas Massey when he wanted cut. Record-breaking contracts and money going to Israel. It's just the way they're selling it is that the Biden administration, they were incapable of doing it. They were a bunch of idiots. We'll put in the right management. But it's not about bucking the system. It's not about really cutting government, right? It's about just changing the management and saying that we're the better management. That's why this thing was all set up this way, right? Why the Democrats went over the top with a lot of the culture war issues, didn't pay attention to the economics, were pro-war. Every single Democrat voted to keep funding the war in Ukraine, Russia. Ridiculous. It's just crazy. They're neocons. So that's what this is all about. It was never about crashing the system. It was just about changing the management to keep the same system of empire intact moving forward.
Yeah. No, it's always about changing
the
face. But it's the same, masters behind it. I mean, I'm really sick of people talking about Trump this and Biden that. Like, let's start erasing that. They're just representatives. They really are not acting differently. They're just taking their turn to focus on certain sectors. Like I said, Trump's got to end the Russia-Ukraine war, but look at him go when it comes to Iran and China and Latin America. And as soon as a Democrat comes in, they'll look back at Eurasia. This is what they do. They've done it for a long time when it comes to the Balkan area. Like this is how things are divided, right? And it's really no different.
Is that it for that section, fam?
Yeah. That's basically.
So that's going to be it for us. We got one more video that we recorded on Friday to play for you guys today. We want to remind everybody that all the links below to help us out are there. We're kind of in this holding pattern. We're figuring things out. We're just kind of staying relevant until we figure what's what. But we're going to try to do the TruthWire on Mondays and Fridays. But we do have a lot of trips planned in front of us. Fiorella has a Substack that I encourage you to go ahead and join. She's doing more writing, which is awesome nowadays because her writing is amazing. I do the Wednesday show, Drive Time, on WBAI. It's a call-in show where you can get on the lines and chit-chat up with us over there. It's pretty fun. And, of course, we also do some work with the Homeless Left, Matt Weinglass, Thursdays on his show. He does a show on Tuesday tomorrow, and he'll be back. Go ahead, Jayme. What do you got?
And also, we do Left on Left on Pasta to Go.
Yeah.
With Gloria
every Thursday,
and Jeremy's Coop tomorrow, every Thursday.
Dude, let me tell you something. When my mom got sick, I handed over that show to Gloria, and we said, why don't you continue to do it? Her monologues are awesome, the way she opens up a show. Her voice sounds great. I don't know how long she's going to last on WBAI with those subjects, but they've been doing some great shows over there, the Professor and Gloria. Go check that out on Pasta to Go. And please go to the Pasta to Go YouTube as well. We do that show over there, so it's really good.
So I'm going to be on that show actually on Thursday.
Awesome.
To talk about my article. Yeah. So
awesome. Check out Gloria and Jeremy's work. It's fantastic. Covert Magazine. So we got a lot of stuff still, a lot of irons in the fire, and we'll continue to keep that going too as well. Also can go back on Union of the Unwanted when I want to. Ricky always has an open spot for me over there, so I'll pop into Union of the Unwanted. AM Wake Up, Steve Poikonen still rocking his show. T-Lab Tuesday over there tomorrow. Go check that show out. I love that. Thank you to the AM Wake Up and the Third Eye Carnival fams out there. You were awesome. It was great to meet you in Tennessee. So we're still doing stuff. We're still hanging on out. We want to thank you guys for joining us today. Enjoy the last segment with Ted Rall. Ted Rall used to be on Sputnik. What's Left? He wrote a book, and we dove into it. I was upset because we agreed too much. I wanted to yell at him, but I couldn't. He's not an establishment Democrat. He doesn't vote for the Democratic Party. and we talk about a lot of things, including COVID, including socialism, including the old Soviet Union. When on Thursdays is the show? Usually, Jayme?
11 a.m. 11 a.m. on Thursdays. We record a radio show, but we record it live on YouTube. So then I edit it, and then it'll show on the. It'll be on the radio the next week.
Yeah. Well, check out this next segment. Go ahead and get it ready, Jayme. Guys, thank you so much. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back with the Ted Rall interview, and we'll see you throughout the week, guys. Thank you so much for watching here. All right, wait, Jayme, make sure you're putting up the right stuff with our links. I'll go check that out. We'll make sure we get the right links. Do you put up our links, Jayme?
On the description?
Yeah,
I think so. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, they're there.
Yeah, they should be there.
All right, I got to go change those things. I'm going to go change those, and we'll put up some Fiorella. We got to put those things up too as well. We'll put up our PayPals, all those other things. I have to redo those. That's why
if things have changed, they haven't been updated in a while.
I have to we'll update those. We'll get those down. Thank you to Fred Edward and all the other people out there. Anna Ringwald, who's in the chat today. Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Anna Mayers. We love you guys. We'll speak to you soon. Truth out.
Hi, guys.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Craig Pasta Jardula here. This is the Truth Wire. I want to remind everybody that every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, I do the show, the call-in show called Drive Time. It's one of my favorite shows to do. I invite you to join us. Just simply go to the WBAI.org website, listen live, and you can always call in live, 212-209-2877. That's 212-209-2877. I like to give that number out in advance because the phone lines get jammed, and sometimes you can't get a call in, but it is a lot of fun. It's on the air live in Greater New York. We do the Truth Wires on normally live Monday and Friday around 12:30 when we're streaming. In this particular situation, we're going to do a live recorded interview and then put it up after. Got a lot of good things going on. Fiorella has a new Substack. She's been doing a lot of work with Vanessa Beeley, talking about what's going on in Syria, what's going on in Russia. So I invite you guys to pay attention to that. And of course, Matt Weinglass is Thursday, a Homeless Left show. I am on that show quite often as a co-host. Listen, so before the sanctions hit in, I used to go on Sputnik quite a bit. There were a lot of shows I used to do. This gentleman who's coming on, I used to do his show quite often. And in his show, they used to have he was kind of the leftist, and there was always a rightist. They switched. There was Angie. There was Steve. I believe he started the show with Manila Chan. And we'd have some great conversations. Well, he just released a book not too long ago. Let me share it with you right now because it's interesting. And I know you guys are going to love this conversation because, you know, you've often heard me say that when I get introduced, if I do these type of events, like if I did Defeat the Mandates, I was introduced as a common sense leftist. This is Craig Pasta Jardula. He's a common sense leftist. When people would talk to me and say, well, what do you mean that you're an old school leftist? I would say, well, I'd have some rules, but I'm an anti-imperialist left. I start there. That's the number one rule about being a leftist in my mind is you have to be an anti-imperialist. You have to be for freedom of speech, freedom of the press. And unfortunately, the Democratic Party has left that kind of mentality. And now they focus a lot on culture war issues.
Hey guys, it's CheeseSlice. I'm going to refresh this one time and just see if that will fix the audio being out of sync with the video. It might just be a problem with the way the recording is, and then I won't be able to fix it. But give me a second. I'm going to see if refreshing it will actually fix it.
Sense leftist. This is defeat the mandates. I was introduced as a common sense leftist. This is Craig Pasta Jardula. He's a common sense leftist. when people would talk to me and say, well, what do you mean that you're an old school leftist? I would say, well, I'd have some rules, but I'm an anti-imperialist left. I start there. That's the number one rule about being a leftist in my mind, is you have to be an anti-imperialist. You have to be for freedom of speech, freedom of the press. And unfortunately, the Democratic Party has left that kind of mentality. And now they focus a lot on culture war issues. Well, anyways, joining us today is Ted Rall to talk about this new book that will be coming out. It's called Never Mind the Democrats, Here's What's Left. And it's interesting because I was going to start a show with Matt, and we were saying, what would be a great name? And I wanted to call it The New Left, which is the same as the old left, what the old Democrats used to be before they went culture war crazy. Here joining us today to talk about this book, Radical Solutions for Radical Problems, is Ted Rall. Ted, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Pasta, for having me. I'm really looking forward to this. This is the first time I've talked about the book anywhere in public, so I'm looking forward to it.
First time you're on one of my shows, right? I've always gone on your shows.
That's right.
You know, I've been in Nicaragua and done your show before, so I've done your show quite a bit. And listen, I don't know what's going to happen with Sputnik. I think it was kind of disgusting what the Democrats did, right? The sanctions that really affected RT and Sputnik. I know after that, 80% of my work went away. Literally, I would do 5 Sputnik shows a week. I do an RT show here and there. I still do RT shows every once in a while. I just did Crosstalk the other day. Had a great conversation about peace through strength. A lot of people question what that means, but let's talk about your book and what you're all about. You have this book called What's Left. Forget about the Democrats. Why don't you tell us what this book is about? And then I'm going to fire away with a lot of questions because I think it's interesting. Because if people were to look at this show, they're like, these are two leftists here, but they're two different leftists. Like I said, I not to insult you, I wouldn't call you a full-blown establishment Democrat, but I don't consider the Democrats leftist. But I do believe you do have some establishment talking points. Like I would agree mostly with your Republican counterparts that I would agree with you sometimes. So let me give you the opportunity. Dive right into us. Tell us what this book is about. What's left? Here is Ted Rall.
Thanks, Pasta. So What's Left is a brain exercise, and it sort of started out with my frustration at the fact that whenever the left has a rally or you hear sort of there's going to be a new left-wing party, and they come and they go. There's nobody ever defines like what is the left, and the problem is, as you sort of alluded to, Pasta, that the left is often conflated with the Democratic Party, the right is conflated with the Republican Party. But I've always been kind of obsessed with this factoid from the Gallup poll. They ask every year, what are Americans' views towards capitalism and socialism? And always, year after year, regardless of what's going on, almost exactly 40% of Americans say that they have a favorable view of socialism. That doesn't mean necessarily that 40% of the electorate is ready to run out into the street with hammer and sickle flags. But and there's even some overlap. There's some people who have a favorable view of both socialism and capitalism. And so it's complicated. But this is the only Western country that doesn't have a developed socialist or communist party. It doesn't have any left of the Democratic Party that it appears on the ballot in every state. The Green Party does not appear on the state and on the ballot in every state. And it occurred to me that the one that everyone wants to start kind of backwards. Instead of organizing grassroots, they want to start with the presidency and work down. Instead of starting from the bottom and working up, they want to start with a national strike. They want to, instead of starting with the ideas that we organize around, they want to start the organization and then figure out the ideas later. And I think I've given a lot of thought to this, and I think basically it has to start with the ideas. We're in a country that has no developed left whatsoever, and that's part of the reason that the crisis that Trump is creating is so profound. Not only are the Democrats useless, but on top of that, there's no left wing that's able to, first of all, pressure the Democrats to move to the left or provide intellectual energy to the Democratic Party, the way that the right provides intellectual energy to the Republican Party. So there's a lot of things going on, but basically what this book is about is we need to start by defining what the left believes in. And I mean the left outside of the Democratic Party to the left of the Democratic Party. So the way I went about this is I looked at all the major issues, the environment, income disparity, deindustrialization, you name it. And the exercise is, what if within the existing system, in other words, without a revolution, without the replacement of one class by another, without the dictatorship of the proletariat, what if you just had an agenda that called for reallocation of federal tax dollars away from where they're currently spent to new ways of spending them? And how would you calculate all that? How would the left do this? And I think the important thing is people are going to say necessarily, well, who's Ted Rall to be telling us anything about what the left should believe in? And the answer is nobody. The point is that the left needs to sit down and hash out what it believes in. And then whatever those ideas are, which may have something in common with what I wrote in the book or nothing at all. But the point is they need, the idea is sit down around a set of ideas and coalesce around those. Then you can start creating a grassroots movement, maybe, and maybe a party and maybe a revolutionary force. But right now, if you ask most Americans, what is the left? They're not going to know if you're talking about like what you describe as like, the woke left or the identity politics left versus traditional like class analysis, Marxist left. And there's left libertarians and there's left anarchists. And there's so many flavors of left. What does it mean? So I think that one of the big crises that that U.S. politics has is that you have maybe 1 out of 4 adult citizens who would be open to doing something to participating in politics to the left of the Democratic Party, which is not a left-wing party, but there's no way to even know what those ideas are. I mean, first, and you have to start with the ideas. So this book is basically trying to set an example like, hey, here's a program for what a left should be about. And, hey, what do you guys think? Please have at it. That's what it's about.
So it's kind of interesting because when I would get introduced as a common sense leftist, right? And they'd say, well, what is that? Well, first off, let me just say this much is that I don't think that we should harp too much or give too much attention to left versus right. I don't even know what that means nowadays. I think everything has been flipped on its head. There were certain views that I saw that, the horseshoe theory, I guess, would come into play, where the right would have certain issues that I used to believe were hardcore left. Let me tell you what my idea of being a leftist is, right? Because I still refer to myself, and sometimes I'll say, well, I'm a real leftist. These guys with their culture war BS, they're not leftists. And one of my questions was, is the Democratic Party left? You've already defined and you said, no, it's not. The Democratic Party is not a leftist party. It's just there to occupy the space where a left party should be. Why is it not a left party? Because I'll explain. Here are the 4 reasons, and I'll go backwards, right? 4, must be pro-worker, anti-Wall Street to be a leftist party. If you're taking all your monies and your ideas and your policy is driven by Wall Street, you're not a leftist party. 3, you must be freedom of the press. Too little people played into the Julian Assange is a rapist because the Democratic Party told him so. They didn't even look into it. And they didn't care so much about what he was doing or his ideas. They didn't understand that he created a system in WikiLeaks in which the whistleblower didn't even have to know who the person was who was putting that information out. They provided a system that allowed the people to see what the government was doing. And I thought that was so important, and it was thrown in the trash. Going backwards, number 2, freedom of speech. Free speech, absolutist. The left used to champion that, right? The whole flag burning situation wasn't to just really upset the right, even though it upset the right too much. And you hear Donald Trump say stupid things like, they should spend a year in jail, Ted, if they burn the flag. 1 year in jail. I mean, it's ridiculous. But we were so freedom of speech, freedom of expression, that we lived in a country that was so free that you had the right to burn its flag. That was the mentality behind it. And the number one reason, working backwards, it must be an anti-imperialist party. It can't be for empire whatsoever. It needs to be anti-war. Those things are not on the table when it comes to the Democratic Party. Why don't you define what the left is? I mean, I understand that you said you set the table out there. We got to come together. We got to have some ideas. But in your heart, what do you believe left actually means?
Well, I think at bare minimum, the left is skeptical of capitalism at bare minimum, and wants to rein it in, and at maximum wants to abolish capitalism, as I do. I think there's also, I think the left is a party of where we believe in citizenship in the United States bestows upon you, just for being alive, the basic necessities of life. So at least the basic necessities. So, in a rich country like the United States, the wealthiest country that's ever existed in human history, nobody should want for food, housing, education, healthcare, transportation. We could argue about a few other things, but things that you'd have to have as a human being in order to survive in our society and to thrive in our society. I would say that the left believes that those things you're entitled to. You don't have to work hard. You don't have to do anything. Sure, maybe like if there's a war where your country is attacked, you have to help defend it. But you're just for breathing and being alive and being American, you get those things. And it's not; those are not privileges. They're just.
I want to start. I want to start there. Let's. You said two things, pretty much an anti-capitalism status, and I think what you're referring to of like not privileges but necessities, and the state should be able to provide them is kind of like a socialist mentality. Correct. Let's start with capitalism, right? Mm-hmm. Because people will say, Pasta, are you an anti-capitalist? I'm like, no, I understand what they mean. When a lot of people talk about capitalism, they talk about the freedom of choice. That's the main thing they want behind capitalism. They want to be able to choose. Isn't there a conflation when you say let's get rid of capitalism? That I don't think you're saying that markets won't exist. You're just saying that the state will provide things and take away a lot from the markets. Don't you think that would conflate with freedom of choice from what a lot of people want in America?
Well, I mean, look, politics, yes, and politics is the process of arguing about things like this, and politics. Questions like this, right? So, in sort of really existing socialist regimes like the Soviet Union in the 20th century, their building towards socialism was basically to allow small enterprise to be private. Like if here in New York, if you have a pizza shop, that wasn't, pizza shop number 14, socialist owned by the Socialist Republic. It's like, it's Bob's Pizza or Maria's Pizza. And what they did is they had major public enterprises like oil companies, utilities, automakers. Those were all owned by the state. And there's choice, consumer choice is what we're talking about here. Consumer choice obviously was much more limited under socialism, and maybe it ought to be. I mean, do we really need 15 different brands of clear dishwashing liquid? Do we need clear dishwashing liquid at all? Probably one or two brands. If it's good, it's good enough. Would probably do the job. It also would address, some environmental issues. I mean, if packaging were more uniform and controlled by the state, it makes recycling easier. So yeah, consumer choice is going to decline.
How do we decide? How do we fix the quagmire of the state choosing too much of this and too much of that? Because, like you're saying, makes sense, but then you can see I have an issue. All right, so I consider myself to be a leftist libertarian, even though I've never been part of the Libertarian Party, and they're a joke too as well right now. Spending some time this year, I did actually vote for the Libertarian in the election because I felt they had a fair primary, unlike the Greens. And
I interviewed the front runner there for the nominee. He was great.
Who?
God, what was his name? But,
Chase Oliver? Or?
Chase Oliver, yeah.
Yeah. I was the first one to get him when he got his nomination. But I did it because I thought they had a fair primary process. But I've never been registered as a libertarian, right? But I consider myself a leftist libertarian because of the reasons I told you are very important to me. My civil liberties, our civil liberties, are very important. When you have a state that has too much control, what's to stop that line of saying, okay, we want to make sure that we can have some things that we don't necessarily need 37 whatever from the capitalist mindset perspective, but what's to stop the state from overreaching and taking control of everything?
Well, look, the people, right, is the only safeguard. There's always going to be a tendency in any society for assholes to expand and try to, try to consolidate their power and towards autocracy and authoritarianism. That's true regardless of the economic system. There's no relationship between there's no relationship whatsoever between an economic system and the form of governance. You can have a totally authoritarian, autocratic capitalist state. You can have a completely democratic and free communist state, and vice versa. I mean, it just sort of those two things are just not related. So in all of those cases, when the government is too big for its britches and is restricting freedom to the point where people don't like it anymore, they have to have a revolution. They have to overthrow it, or they have to threaten to overthrow it to the point where reforms become possible. That's true in every society, and it always will be. I don't think there's any way to create a system that is foolproof. Any system that you create is going to have, like right now, the system of checks and balances that served the United States pretty well has fallen apart because there was something that the founding fathers never really considered, which was, what if the courts, which don't have they don't have an enforcement mechanism, what if they're ignored by the executive branch? We're seeing what happens right now with the deportations, and it's creating a constitutional crisis. That's not because the founding fathers were morons. It's just because they just didn't anticipate this. And any system that I would have a hand in creating would contain flaws that will ultimately lead to its downfall. I mean, that's just the human experience.
Let's talk about the other part as far as what people are entitled to. You said it's not privileges. They're entitled to the basic human decency of housing, food, healthcare. What's to stop people not participating in society where the conservatives say, you got the people who will just take advantage of the system. They won't be a part of the system. If you have a system where everything is provided, isn't that going to sack the motivation of people trying to participate in the society and add to it, rather just kind of suck off it? I mean, that's the conservative argument. Right. Give me your opinion on that.
Well, I think that's a 20th century argument. We live in a time where because of automation and artificial intelligence and improvements in technology, that really the GDP can continue to increase with a continually declining workforce. The worker participation rate in this country was about 72% when I was a kid. Now it's about 63%. It's going to continue to decline. Effectively, 37% of the country is permanently unemployed or unemployable. Now, do we want to say that over a third of the country's population is disposable and they should live out on the streets? Even if you don't care about them and you're cruel and heartless, that's going to make for a dangerous, very unstable, unsafe society, right? So we don't want that. I guess my whole point is, it's okay to have those people sit at home and collect checks because they're not needed in an office or in a factory or anything. They just aren't. And the other thing is, I'm really less worried. I've always been less worried about that because, again, looking at the Soviet or other socialist regimes, people have, even when people earned the same amount of money to sit at home versus working, people like to work. It makes them feel valuable.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I both do things like this, for example, that, I'm not getting paid for this. It's like, I don't care because I'm enjoying it. I've had jobs that were less, that were harder. Let's just say that. I drove a taxi. I liked driving a taxi. I would do that rather than sit at home. You know, I like people like to feel useful. People like to, we're social animals. We like to contribute. So I'm convinced that if you're basically down to, can you get 1 out of 2 American adults to do something, even if it means that, you know, they're getting paid just a little more than their neighbors who are sitting at home. I think you will. I really do. I think, you know, in the Soviet Union, people, you know, scientists worked overtime. You know, there's other rewards besides money. There's fame, money. There's notoriety. You can win. You know, people want the medal. They want the award from the state. There's ways to reward people beyond just cash.
What do you say to those libertarians out there that say no matter what you do, the state will always turn corrupt and they'll take advantage of every single situation? I mean, I know you kind of sprinkled on it about the revolution situation, but we have a society that's so divided, right? It's really hard to get people on the same page. I mean, we're gonna dive a little bit into that as the show goes on, because funny, I brought today's show the arguments between Candace Owens and Roseanne Barr, and the funny thing is, and I don't want to get too far ahead, but what do you say to people that say, no, the state will always be corrupt? The best way to do things is to have more of an anarchist society, let people police themselves, obviously make laws that say you're not allowed to hurt somebody else, but to give people as much freedom to do what they want, as long as there's no monopoly on violence. That's the better way to go. It's better than allowing the state to dictate what's going to happen.
Well, you know, ultimately, you know, under classic Marxism, right? Theoretically, although we never got there, the state would ultimately fall apart, and after years of centuries of
utopia,
socialism,
right?
Utopia is achieved, and then we all live that way, right? Nobody's seen that happen. Nobody's seen a hint of that. We can't see that light at the end of the tunnel. But we also haven't really seen a truly socialist state either.
You know, I got to interrupt you, because you know what, the conservatives will say, we haven't seen a true capitalist society where you take the regulations out and you take the monopolies out and you let the market just exist on its own. I
would argue with them about that.
From the libertarians, free market forces. Ted,
I have seen. So look, I have a lot of sympathy for the libertarian argument about the inherently corrupt influence of state power. They're right. They're totally right. That is a problem that we're going to have to fight. We're going to have to face no matter what. Now, that said, I have seen a perfect libertarian utopia. Afghanistan during the Civil War. It was a perfect libertarian utopia. There's no state at all. There's no state services. People relied entirely on each other. They policed each other. It wasn't all bad. You know, there were certain things that just were not tolerated. And it was if you.
What years are these you talking about?
You know, from basically 1999 to 2010, 2015. Afghanistan, it was a complete catastrophe, and I should say, well, it was a non-state. I mean, it was such a non-state.
A lot of anarchist, tribal stuff, you know.
Currency didn't even circulate in most of the country, right? So it's barter, it's self-reliance on the community. You know, it's very local, and there were things about it that worked. I mean, I remember one time I got on a plane, and this was sort of a little bit later, and when there were planes. And, you know, I was sitting next to a white guy, and all these Afghans come on and they're throwing their RPGs and their AK-47s in the overheads. And his eyes are big, and he was shaking like a leaf. And I'm like, dude, you got to relax. I go, this is the safest plane you will ever be on. He goes, what do you mean? I go, you think anyone's going to hijack this plane?
Yeah, no doubt. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the differences that we do have as far as like what's left and what's not. The Democrats. Let's talk about some of their biggest flaws. What do you think the biggest flaws of the Democratic Party are today? Because
it seems like we have to do this show.
Huh?
How many days do we have to do this show?
I know. Well, we still got about a half hour. We got a little bit more time, so we can get into it.
Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, well, are you encouraging people to go and try to reform the Democratic Party? What would you encourage people to do moving forward And what are the greatest flaws of the Democratic Party?
All right. Well, I'll go in order. The main thing that people need to do is build a grassroots movement that is of the left and that represents we the people. Now, what that looks like, that's going to happen organically as the people come together.
What about the Green Party?
Well, the Green Party is effectively blocked. It's too disorganized. They could theoretically maybe be hijacked and you could maybe take them over. But the Democratic Party is impervious to that. I mean, the problem is that the Democratic Party has a tendency, we've seen this time after time, they absorb the energy of the real left. They detract, they deflect. And if you just think about all the people, if people spent the money that they donated to Kamala Harris, the hours that they spent canvassing for Joe Biden, if they spent all of that energy and effort, and they were the people on the left, use that to build a true left-wing political party, organization, mass movement, it would be unstoppable. It's like the Democratic Party just takes it all and just, they're sending bombs to Israel to drop on Gaza. The flaws of the Democratic Party are first and foremost that it's indistinguishable policy-wise on important issues from the Republicans. You mentioned, Pasta, that you have to be an anti-imperialist to be a leftist. I agree. You can't possibly be against national self-determination or for neocolonialism or oppressing people in other nations and call yourself a leftist. You can't. And so, but the Democratic Party is a militaristic party that votes lockstep with the Republicans to approve every massive, over-the-top, $1 billion a year plus defense bill, right? So right there, I could stop there. That's enough reason never to vote Democratic, support Democrats, donate to them ever. But we can go on. I mean, when the Democrats have a chance to change things, as for example, when Obama had a supermajority in the U.S. Senate and control of the House, and he said, legalizing abortion, that's not a priority. Or, he could have had a public option, which he promised to do, included in the Affordable Care Act, chooses not to do it. And so what's the flaw there? The flaw is that the Democratic Party is a capitalist party, a corporatist party that collects most of its donations from Fortune 500 transnational corporations. So there, you work for the people who pay you, right? And the people who are there being paid by is not us, not enough. It's these giant corporations. So of course, when AIPAC calls and they're major donors to the Democratic Party, they take the call. If I call, they don't take the call. So I mean, they just haven't been there, and they're not going to be there for we the people. Look at some basic issues. Minimum wage last increased in 2009 to $7.25 an hour. It ought to be $30 or $40 an hour now if it had just kept up with inflation since 1970. But there's no move whatsoever. Even like Bernie Sanders, is as far left as is allowed to be in the Democratic Party. He's pushing for 17. 17's a joke, okay? And then you can just go on and on with the Democratic Party. They have not proposed a single anti-poverty program since the Johnson administration. I'm 61 years old. I was 2 when that happened. Okay, so I mean, I've lived an entire.
At least you were around for it. I was never around for it. I just turned 52, Ted. So
I mean, I'm so old that if I died today, people would be like, that sucks. But they wouldn't say he died so young. You know what I mean? That's it's ridiculous.
Well, I'm not liking the show right now because we're agreeing on too many things, and I thought we would disagree on certain things and stuff. So I mean, it's funny to me because it's a quagmire. Because I hear libertarians saying, no, somebody should be able to offer whatever they want. If somebody wants to work for whatever that price is, that should be it. The state shouldn't dictate what's going on. But now we see on TikTok and Instagram.
Can I interrupt that? I wanted to say that would work if you had a balance between labor and management that made, that was like a, Adam Smith's ideal world. The problem is that especially in a globalized environment, capital is highly fluid and can move anywhere in the world. So if I'm a capitalist and I want to start a factory to make sneakers, I don't have to do that. I can sell sneakers in New York and get $300 a pair, but I can make them for 13 cents a pair in Malaysia at my new Malaysian Rall Corp, no problem, right?
Yeah.
But like, let's say I want to make sneakers and be paid to make sneakers, and I don't want to be paid 13, and I live in Malaysia. I don't want to make 13 cents an hour. I want to move to the United States. Well, I can't, right? Because I don't have US citizenship. I can't do that. And not to mention, let's just say you abolished like all international borders. Snap your fingers. They're all gone, right? One world government. Even so, if you're Malaysian, what are the chances that you're going to move to the United States? You don't speak English. You're going to abandon your family. You're not going to see, your cultural ties. You're never going to eat the food from your hometown again. You're probably not going to do that. So capital is fluid, and labor is static and stationary. So as the world becomes more global, and it's easy to communicate and send stuff cheaply all over the world, there's just no way labor can compete. That's why the government or some kind of arbiter, it can be a giant, it can be a god, but someone has to put their thumb on the scale and say, no, if you want to pay human beings, there's a certain base amount just to have a living, breathing human being sit at a desk or wherever you're having them do. Just to show up, you have to pay them something decent. Otherwise, wages are going to drop to slavery.
Yeah. What about tariffs then? Because what you're trying to say is, all right, so the spirit of tariffs is McKinley would say, what do you want? You want cheaper products or higher wages? So when Donald Trump
higher
says
wages.
what's that? Exactly. So when Donald Trump says, I'm going to throw tariffs on certain products, he's trying to say, in a way, let's try to bring some manufacturing home. Now, that might not be what he wants to do, and he might just be faking it. Who knows? But the spirit of a tariff is to say we're not going to take advantages of the things like the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, which killed, manufacturing here at home. So what are your thoughts about tariffs if they're used in a way that's supposed to meant to bring a factory home so we can get better wages and get some manufacturing? Doesn't that play well? Isn't the president actually doing well by trying to throw tariffs up there?
Well, so I'm not congenitally opposed to tariffs. I just think that they're a solution to a 1960 problem in 2025. I grew up in a town that was completely devastated by deindustrialization, Dayton, Ohio. It's a classic Rust Belt story of losing industry. It was massive, and now it's completely hollowed out. So Dayton, Ohio is one of the places that Trump campaigned at extensively in the 2016 race, and it's part of the reason that he became president the first time. I think if you can be a worker, you're a worker and you're a consumer, right? But in an ideal world, you earn more than you spend on consumption. In that world, you care more about having a wage. You care more about having a wage increase. If it's the other way around and you're spending more than you earn, I guess maybe controlling consumer prices is more important as long as there's no downward pressure on your wages. But ideally, we don't live there. And the problem with tariffs is I don't see the motivation from a capitalist point of view for the entrepreneur who's looking to maybe reindustrialize Dayton and how that works, right? So President Trump, let's just say he raises he keeps the tariff static, and it seems like for the foreseeable future, it's going to make sense to make things here as opposed to overseas because you won't have the shipping costs involved with putting stuff on a container ship and bringing them in from Malaysia, for example. Fine, but the problem is you don't know who the president's going to be in 3 years. Will it be President Buttigieg, President Vance? We don't know what their policies will be. And my factory at Rall Corp in Dayton is not going to be up and running for at least 3, 5, 7 years after I get all the permits and blah, 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 hire everybody. So with that uncertainty, I think everyone's just going to sit on their hands and wait and see. And that's the problem. I mean, the jobs are already
How do
gone.
we
The
fix it then?
factories are
Well, it's a
already gone.
quagmire then. How do we fix that? Stay right there for a second. All that being said, how do we fix this problem? Now, what would be your solution? If they're going to sit on their hands, how do we fix this issue of labor here in the United States? Go ahead.
Well, I think we need to decouple income from wages. I mean, sorry, income from work. The idea that you have, our current model is if you are going to make stuff, if you want to be able to pay your bills, you have to have a job. I don't think that's true. I mean, what matters is national GDP. Under a socialist regime, you can collect all that money and you can distribute it and pay what Elon Musk a few years ago called not a universal basic income, but a universal high income. In other words, more than enough for people not just to pay the electricity bill, but everything, to go out to the movies, to go to dinner with their family, go on vacation, everything. You're paying people to sit at home. You basically, because the thing is, this is it's not an income problem. It's a distribution of income problem. I mean, we have a lot more money, total income coming in than ever before. The problem is that it's only going into an increasingly smaller number of oligarchs who are collecting massive amounts of money while everybody else's wages either stay frozen or drop. So socialism is about putting your thumb on the scale and redistributing that money and those other resources. That's my solution to that problem. I mean, the fact is, globalization's here to stay. Trade is here to stay. I wish it wasn't true, but it is true. Now, you can certainly pass rules and say, we're not going to trade for things that we make here in the United States. I don't know why we sell foreign cars in the United States. We make cars. Why? I understand why, we import.
Because if I want a Toyota, I should be able to get a Toyota, right?
I don't know. Why? What for? Drive a Ford.
Because I want to. I want the choice. I want the freedom. If in fact, if we are not allowed to buy Toyotas, what's going to keep Chevy for staying up high standards to a Toyota? It's a capitalist mindset. They'll just cut corners, wouldn't they?
Well, and that is, look, it's a fair concern. That's what happened in the 1970s when American cars went to shit. And then the Japanese were able to, take advantage of that. I drive a Honda. Okay. So, I totally get it, but you can also control those standards through government intervention and regulation. You can totally tell automakers here, you have to do this and that in terms of safety and quality. Otherwise, you're screwed.
Yeah. It sounds to me like you're an MMT guy. Are you an MMT guy?
What's MMT?
Modern monetary theory. In other words, you were talking about money, right? Wealth and how it's being redistributed. But what's being redistributed? It's just a fiat currency, and the government can print more or distribute more if they want to. So, all right. So you're not an MMT guy. I don't know because it's
no. I don't think so. I'll have to look into it.
All right. So let's talk about some of the things that I was very curious. There's one thing, and I don't mean to talk about this, but why did the left go along with the COVID protocols in your mind? I want to talk about this because this is two things we are totally different on, right? I mean,
I don't know. We might not be.
Well, you're an anti-capitalist, right?
I am.
And I don't know. You don't have to disclose or not if you took the shot or not, right? I did not.
I took it, and I'll tell you why. Like
hold on. Let me.
At the time,
go ahead.
I'll tell you my stance at the time, and it's documentable because you can go read I wrote kind of a very high-profile piece during the pandemic, for the Wall Street Journal, where I basically said, look, I've taken more shots than I was entitled to. And I don't believe anyone should lose their job or be punished or thrown out of school for not taking the shot. It's like, it was my choice. When the pandemic started, I was terrified when I found out it was a respiratory disease because I have shitty lungs. Okay, so my entire life, I've had pneumonia probably 8-9 times. I had swine flu. I was terrified, and I had COVID, as it turns out, in December of 2019. And I didn't know what it was. I almost died. So when I heard I was kind of like, if I get this thing, and I don't have any vaccine, I'm going to die. If I don't, and people were like, well, what if it's toxic and bad for you? That could well be. And I'm still going to take it because I'm going to die anyway if I don't. But I was like, but I always maintained it was my personal decision to make. And it was if the government wanted to convince people that they needed to do it, it should have been done with a public education campaign. It should always have been optional. It's a bodily autonomy issue. No one should, including people in the military who are constantly being jabbed with things that they have no choice to. No one should have the right to say, oh, you're going to be denied your right to a public school education because you didn't get an MMR shot or whatever. That should be up to you, or if you're a little kid, up to your parents. That's not that. In that sense, I am a libertarian, and I think it's like if the government, it's sort of like my view about war, why there shouldn't be a draft. If you have a war where you can't get enough people to volunteer, your war is not popular enough to win. And like, if you can't get, enough people to come up with herd immunity for your vaccine, you haven't convinced people that vaccine is safe. So therefore, you don't get it. That was always my take.
Should the vaccine manufacturers and big pharma have qualified immunity? So in other words, should they have protection from the government that nobody should sue them in this situation during COVID?
No, not at all. I mean, it's like if anyone has a case that they were, harmed in any way, no one should have immunity from being sued. If you did something that caused harm to another human being, they should get their day in court.
Have you looked into Pfizer's own data on the vaccine now itself? I don't want to scare you because I know you took it, but something like 120 something odd side effects, and their own data shows that guys like me were right. What are your thoughts on today when we hear these guys talk about it, and why isn't anybody paying a price?
Well, nobody's paying a price because the government was on the other side of this, right? I stopped taking the shots, a few years ago after it became, clear that you can get COVID and not die, right? Yeah. COVID's just a cold now. But obviously, look, this was rushed into production. It's not shocking to me that there might be some problems with it. It was, we at the time that the pandemic started, you can find the old stories in the New York Times and elsewhere. Oh, it's going to take probably at least 5 years to, test everything, and then of course 6 months later, poof, there it is, like magic. And at the time, I was really grateful and happy about it. And I think for me personally, I did make the right call, because even if it turns out that like I die next week because I took those vaccines, it was still the right call for Ted Rall. But it doesn't mean that it's the right call for you. It's like, this is where everybody should get they have their, it's your individual right.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Ted Rall was right. I think Ted Rall was wrong, but that's okay. But Ted Rall has the right to make the decision for himself. I do agree with that. But I believe Ted Rall was lied to. And I believe that, and it's kind of crazy because after the Biden administration went right from COVID protocols into the Ukraine war, we would make this joke that Putin cured COVID because all of a sudden nobody cared about the COVID protocols and the mandates anymore. They went right into Ukraine, and they had their little Ukraine flags at the State of the Union. I think at Biden's first State of the Union. It was kind of crazy. I want to talk about something else. With the COVID protocols being the way they were, and you saying that the state should have certain responsibilities, doesn't that prove wrong? Doesn't that theory prove that the libertarians were right? That if you allow the state to make decisions, especially in a time of crisis, right? And I believe it was a manufactured crisis, like this is obviously something that was thrust upon the people, because I believe the ruling class are a bunch of Malthusians that want to get rid of us anyways. To me, the missed opportunity is that a lot of people didn't see that the ruling class doesn't care about any of us. In other words, there was always this thought process that white supremacy reigns through, that the ruling class cares about white people more than they do about anybody else. I don't. I believe they use that to divide us. And COVID showed that, because the least hesitant group in America for COVID vaccines were white people, right? Black people had a history of, Tuskegee, and they were like, no, I'm hesitant. Doesn't the COVID situation and the protocols that came out kind of push back against your theory that the state should have certain responsibilities for people to have a level of decency in their life? Isn't the case study that it wouldn't work?
I mean, I guess I don't really. I can ask you to clarify a little bit. I mean, like, what's the possible abuse that could take place if the state were to say, yeah, we're going to have, high-speed rail everywhere in the country, and it's going to be affordable, like or free. Like, I don't see. I mean, I guess they could build shitty high-speed rail that derails all the time, but I mean, the point is that, like, the state. This is the system that we currently have, right? And to say that the state, it's not like breaking news to say that nation states constantly exploit or manufacture crises, real or imagined, in order to oppress people, right? I mean, after 9/11, the USA Patriot Act, on college campuses right now, this completely fictional anti-Semitism thing that is being used to justify, shutting down campuses and crushing protests and deporting people for having, the crime of writing a letter to the editor of their college paper. Those things are all manufactured. And, and then sometimes there's a real crisis like World War II, and the president, decides to take advantage of it and deport a bunch of completely innocent, peaceful Japanese Americans to internment camps and steal their property, right? So, and their businesses. I mean, so yeah, nation states are often abusive and aggressively so. I mean, now that said, this is the system we have, and we could have a revolution and overthrow it and have a government by the people. But you're going to have to keep doing this. It's like, the need to. You're never done. Politics is never. You don't, arrive at a point and you're like, okay, we're done here. We did the heavy lifting. We had the revolution. It's year zero. We're awesome. We're done. That's never going to be true.
Got to keep working.
Always.
It's funny because I thought we would have a lot more disagreements, and I kind of agree with you, because people ask me, Pasta, what makes you a leftist that you say that you're a common sense leftist or a leftist libertarian? As I always say, I believe in central planning. I see China have railroads all over the place, and I say, and what I'm starting to understand is that I don't know if you're a full-blown communist. I believe you have social ideas, right? And I think that what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, the government has its place, right? Like, it has its place in which, for instance, people go, well, why do you constantly say that Nicaragua is your favorite country that you've gone to out of the 7 Latin American countries? I say, well, they're a socialist country to the point where markets do exist. They're in charge of infrastructure, education, food, like providing their own food,
healthcare,
healthcare, and if there's a crisis, that's when the government comes in. There's 8 zones in Nicaragua, and 2 of them are autonomous. In other words, they allow the people in those areas, which are the Afro-Indigenous people of the Caribbean over there, to have their own judges, have their own laws, do all those things themselves, and the government stays out. Can you give us a little bit of idea on how central planning can work? Because I say this all the time, Ted. I say we're one species on one planet, right? We have to find a way to play nicely in the sandbox together. I believe we can make some good things and create some good things for society. If China has all this high-speed rail going all over the place, why can't the United States go? And they say to me, well, it's a security state. I mean, wait a second. Are you saying that you have to be a security state to have nice things? It makes no sense. Give us your ideas and your thoughts on central planning.
France has high-speed rail all over the place. It's not a security state.
Yeah.
Germany has it. Lots of countries have. Japan, they're not a security state. They have, to the extent that they're all security states now.
Yeah, I know. We are. We're all security states, first of all. But go ahead.
Yeah, but relatively, right, compared to China, which I have visited a couple of times. It's definitely, central planning is easier under an authoritarian regime But there's no reason why the United States couldn't do it, and we have done it. I mean, the U.S. government took control of part of the financial sector in 2008, 2009 during the subprime mortgage crisis. Obviously, the 1930s and New Deal involved a lot of central planning. I mean, anywhere you drive, particularly in the eastern half of the country, you're going to see WPA concrete bridges, dams, tunnels, all over the place, right? That's central planning. You go to a national park, you're going to see trails and bridges that were built by the CCC under FDR. That's central planning. The world, the COVID, the COVID, the vaccine Operation Warp Speed, that was central planning. Some of it was stupid.
We were trying to sell good things here, Ted. Let's not sell the bad ones. Let's stick with the good ones, please, buddy.
Definitely, but like the World War II economy, like ramping up, production within converting auto plants to making tanks and planes. That's central planning. So the U.S. can do it. And it's just a matter of, and we have incredible industrial capacity, even after everything that's happened. So, we could have nice things. We're choosing not to. Yeah. And that's kind of the thesis of what's left, which is if you just take the $4.5 trillion a year that come into the coffins of the United States government and you move it around, you can literally abolish homelessness overnight. No, why is anyone sleeping outside? You can make college free for everybody. You tell everybody they have to have a college degree to work. Well, then, make it free at least.
Well, now you have the points of like, well, what are they teaching at college and they're teaching at schools because our education has gone so down the toilet, right? We're not teaching our kids in school to think for themselves anymore. We're just teaching them to obey. That's the bottom line. I mean, we can talk about the woke versus the anti-woke stuff, but they're not teaching people to think for themselves. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, and not to mention a lot of stuff that we teach kids is not terribly useful, right? I mean, my kids in junior in college, nobody's ever taught him up until this point, how to handle personal finances, or he doesn't know what would be involved.
They don't teach that at school.
Buy a car.
Yeah. They don't teach you how the monetary system works, and I think that's on design. They teach you how to get in debt. They don't teach you how it works. Here's my thoughts. Tell me if I'm wrong. Like, this is the only way that we can save ourselves right now as a nation, right? Because I think that Donald Trump is trying to at least he's trying to sell to the everyday average person that we're going to win, Ted. We're going to bring back money. We're going to win so much. Forget about it. But how do we do that? Well, the only way we can do that is infrastructure. And I argued with you on your show before about Joe Biden's infrastructure plan, because if you read it and you looked at it, it's not an infrastructure plan. Right. It really is just about nationalizing freeways so that the state can run pipelines along those freeways to get out to different ports in the Gulf and different areas. And that's what it was really about. It really wasn't recreating or rebuilding the United States. I mean, everything's fallen down over here. We have railroad practices that go back to 1973 around this country. So if we want to really put people to work, let's modernize this country. Let's put people back to work. Use that central planning to rebuild things. Let's start, getting farmers more land out here to grow our own food. Why are we importing our own so much food from elsewhere? Why wouldn't we make our food, and why won't we make it healthy? Our food supply is so crappy. I mean, we've allowed these corporations to buy off government. We're letting kids eat plastic, and we talked a little bit about my eczema before. I look at the food I've been eating for years, and it's so dirty. So if we first invest in infrastructure, we can put a lot of people back to work, right? Maybe we'll need some of those immigrants that people are complaining about because they can help us out, rebuild things. And then we start creating our own food supply. Wouldn't you say those are two ways to get this economy rolling? Or do you have any other ideas on how we can kind of fix America?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm not sure that I would necessarily agree that the economy is the issue as much as how the benefits, the value added from the workers that are contributing to that economy is currently being distributed. But certainly, I mean, look, who could argue about the food issue, right? I mean, one of the things I was excited about RFK Jr., I don't know if he's going to do this or not, but it was his promise to institute EU-style regulations on American food supply. That would be great. It would be a really nice start. And, you know, you mentioned like high-speed rail. I also am obsessed with it. You know, one thing I found really fascinating when I looked at an early map of New York City, and they laid out the where the main crosstown streets were, they didn't necessarily correspond to where the subway stops ended up, right? But with very few exceptions now, every place where there's a subway stop is a major crosstown street. And that's because they built the subway first. And then because that was a subway station, businesses sprung up along those streets, and people wanted to live near those subway stations. So they became more important, wider, more, and you know, and that's how high-speed rail is too. And, you know, if you build, if you make it, imagine if you just could snap your fingers, and next week there was let's say a 49 state contiguous rail system that could, you know, get you from, say, you know, Missoula, Montana to to Bismarck in like 2 hours. I mean, it's going to completely revolutionize the country. It's going to increase real estate values in places where they're currently low. You're going to have the ability to have, you're going to have all sorts of synergies, people building things in places and that used to be remote but are no longer remote. It's going to increase your freight capacity. I mean, it'll be revolutionary in the same way that like the automobile created the suburbs, right? It became practical for people to live far away from cities. That it's not always good, but the point is it'll have a revolutionary effect and it'll tie us all together. It would have, you know, you talked about how divided we are as a country. People tend to be less divided when they get to know each other. You know, the more people in big cities like New York are all pressed together in the subway. They get to know each other regardless of, you know, their class or their race or whatever. And like that would tie the country. If you're from, you know, the Ozarks, but it's really easy for you to get to Chicago, you're going to get to know Chicagoans and you guys are going to understand each other better and probably like each other better. So
I think that's why they want to limit travel in this the ruling class. They want you to make sure that there's a them and there's a you, and you don't know anything about them. I think that's part of the whole master plan. It's funny that you talk about that, but I also believe not just being able to get people around. I'm with you. I believe that we need some central planning. We need to get this high-speed rail all over the place. I mean, you know, I see China and it's like, holy cow, how the hell are we not doing this? You know, and then you get those same arguments. Oh, well, that's a security state. And yeah, it would be a lot easier if it's an authoritarian measure to get things done. That doesn't mean we need to have an authoritarian measures to get things done. We're supposed to be the greatest nation in the world. We're supposed to, right? We should figure this out. I also think that if people are less stressed about the homeless situation, about paying their bills and not being threatened to throw out, that's going to relieve a lot of tensions and make our neighbors get along with each other. Ted, it
would address the opioid epidemic. We wouldn't be drugging ourselves.
Well, that's another thing too. Once again, why I didn't trust Big Pharma is because Big Pharma are the people who got people addicted to the opioids.
True.
When people talk about the fentanyl crisis, right? I say, what are you talking about? Why are you trying to blame? First of all, the cartels work for the CIA. We learned this during the Iran-Contra. Nothing has changed that. They wouldn't be able to move their product around. And this isn't like a little old lady from you know, Mexico smuggling in fentanyl. That's not the problem over here. When you really look at the crux of the issue, and this is why I never trusted Big Pharma, because I was in the streets. You know, when we were marching for universal health care, the number one enemy was the pharmaceutical companies. So there was no way I was going to trust them on a vaccine that just popped out of nowhere. And obviously you do the research, and if you know the things I know, unfortunately you would be called a right winger. But I come from the left wing where it was like, no, Johnson & Johnson killed people. They used them as lab rats in Africa, right? And I'm not going to trust them ever again. I know what they've done with medicine for so long. But, you know, I wanted to say that it bothers me today that you came on and we agreed on so much. I thought I was going to come after you and yell at you about a bunch of things.
Next time.
Maybe if you get your show back, or if I just come on the show with you in Manila, I can come on and yell with you. You do have your show. We don't need, the government's permission. It's a shame what the Democrats did. I don't know if it was the Democrats altogether, because you don't see the right coming in and restoring free speech. It seems like every single time they take away some of our freedoms, we never get it back, whether it be, the Patriot Act or the AUMF and what's going on in government. Give us a last minute plug on your book, where they can find you and all the great things that you have to say. And thank you so much for coming on, Ted.
Thanks, Pasta. It was a pleasure. And sorry that I wasn't disagreeable enough, but we can work on that.
I know. I thought you would be more of an established Democrat. You're not.
Nah. Well, that's why we needed a little more time. Yeah, we used to only be able to have you on for like 10 or 15 minutes. So we didn't have time to dig in. So the book comes out May 1st. It's called Never Mind the Democrats, Here's What's Left. And basically it's a call to put together to organize around a set of principles and ideas. And I threw out some ideas for what those could be, but we need to start having that dialogue. There will be a link on my website, rall.com, as soon as it goes up. You can order this one on Amazon. You can also go to any bookstore after May 1st, and they'll order it for you. It's not just self-published that way. So I spent a little more money on this one, so hopefully it'll do. I think the timing is good. If you've been wondering, like, oh my God, Trump, and what am I going to do? But the Democrats suck.
Do you think the Democrats are the lesser of two evils, though? Do you believe that? Do you still believe that the Democrats are the lesser of two evils?
No, I haven't believed that in years, and I haven't voted for Democrats in years.
Awesome. What do you think Donald Trump's biggest sin is that he's doing right now? His biggest fault right now.
So it's two. I'm gonna have to answer in two parts. Temperament. The president is supposed to be like have a calm temperament that makes you feel like kind of like this is your captain speaking. Up here on the flight deck, we're gonna be like that sense of calm when you hear that Texas Chuck Yeager accent that all pilots cultivate, even if they're from Boston. You like that sense of we're all Americans. He's terrible at that. But also the violation of basic human rights with the deportations, punishing people for fighting
without due process
for human rights in punishing people for fighting for human rights in Gaza, no due process, scooping people off the streets. He says he wants to do it to U.S. citizens too, the homegrowns he calls them.
Yeah,
that's fascism. So I have to go with fascism.
Ted Rall, ladies and gentlemen, go check out his new book. Go follow him on Twitter or wherever else he's hanging on out. He does a show with our good friend Manila Chan. Ted, thank you again for coming on. Next time, let's bump heads a little bit more so we can sell more tickets over here. It'll be a little entertaining. Thank you again, buddy.
Thank you.
That was Ted Rall, everybody. Thank you so much for coming on today. We do appreciate you supporting the show. All the links are down below. I am Craig Pasta Jardula. We'll see you later.